Supporters of the Grieving Families Act are calling on Governor Hochul to sign that legislation before lawmakers in Albany head home for the holidays. The bill would change eligibility to file wrongful death claims on behalf of loved ones. It would also allow family members to be compensated for emotional loss. Despite being well received by both parties in Albany, Governor Hochul vetoed two earlier versions of the Grieving Families Act, saying that it could have unintended consequences on healthcare companies and on businesses. Joining me now to discuss the Grieving Families Act and how it could impact his family, Jose Marrero. He is an advocate for the bill. His wife died during a routine procedure at Maimonides Medical Center last year. He is also joined, I should point out, by Christopher Donadio, his attorney. And I want to thank you both for coming on to talk about this. And Jose, let me start with you. Tell us what happened last October in terms of your wife and what followed.
She went in for an ambulatory surgery. Was supposed to be in and out within an hour and a half to two, and it didn't happen.
It didn't happen, and she passed away. And am I understanding this right, that under the current version of the law, because your wife was sedated and unconscious when she died, she is not entitled, you are not entitled to any pain and suffering losses?
No.
And so Chris, maybe you can come in here and explain a little bit of what is Jose entitled to and how this law might change really the suffering and the shock that he endured when she went into a routine procedure and then passed.
Sure. So as the law has stood in New York for almost 180 years now, someone like Mr. Marrero, who loses a loved one, who does not suffer any pain and suffering, and in this case, his wife unfortunately died in the middle of the procedure, the only damages he and his family, his children, are entitled to are itemized wrongful death damages under the statute, which are limited to a loss of his wife's income and a loss of the services for what she did around the home, the cooking and cleaning. And unfortunately, unless somebody is a very high wage earner, that limits what the recovery is for the family. And it doesn't take into account their personal grief or any sort of treatment they may need for losing their spouse, losing their loved one. It's a really horrible, antiquated law that exists really only in one other state other than New York. Other states have changed this.
Other states except for New York and one other state?
Yes, New York and Alabama. Other than New York and Alabama, essentially all other 48 states have decided that wrongful death damages limited that way are not acceptable. But here in New York, we have not done that.
Jose, tell me a little bit about how that has impacted your family, not being able to file the claim that Chris is talking about.
For right now, it's, well, it impacted a lot because in New York, everything is a two-family income now, and now it's not.
And I imagine, as we're looking at pictures of you with your wife, aside from the emotional extreme distress that this has caused you, the burden that it has placed on you, saying that you've gone now from a two to a one-family income house, have you had any ability to even stop and grieve because you've had to be working so much?
I had some.
Yeah, I'm so sorry for what you've endured, and it seems like this has really made your processing your grief that much more difficult. Chris, talk a little bit about what you would hope if this act were to pass, and I should point out that those, like the governor saying here, part of the concern is the impact it would have on businesses, consequences on premium and cares. Do you understand that perspective that critics have put forth, and can you answer to that?
Sure, absolutely. And what we have said to the governor and the groups who support this bill is look at the other states. Look at what has happened when those states have implemented laws like the Grieving Families Act. Premiums have not gone up. And in fact, when we have had changes in the law in our own state, for instance, the Laverne's law that was passed several years ago that opened the door to allow certain people who'd been misdiagnosed with cancer to sue, again, the concern and the critics said this is going to increase premiums. That did not happen. So that's what we have to say to that. And the flip side of it is, what we say is, look at what it does to people like Mr. Marrero and his family and his children. That we essentially have an unequal system of justice when it comes to wrongful death. If you have a high-earning Wall Street executive who suffers a death at the hands of someone else, their family is going to be compensated very, very well. If you have anybody in the middle class, that's simply not the case. It is an unequal law that needs to change. And I know that the critics are they're quick to point out that trial lawyers like myself are the ones who are talking about this bill and that we have some personal gain. Well, I can tell you this, the reason that we talk about it so much is because every single day of my career, I have to sit with people like Mr. Marrero, who it's an honor to sit with, and I have to explain to them why, despite the fact they have lost a loved one, they have lost a child, or they have lost a spouse, why they are not entitled to compensation. And it is a terrible thing. We see the harm, and we know the reason the law must change.
Jose, in our final seconds here, if you could speak directly to Governor Hochul on this matter, what do you want her to know?
Actually, take a look at things. Stop just vetoing and look at what's going on. Don't just sit there behind a desk and it's like, oh, everything is not, easy.
Jose Marrero, Christopher Donadio, appreciate you both coming on. Thank you so much.